Okay. Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our Deputy Chief Gord, obviously in the next 2 years, if everything goes well here, every station will have the same state-of-the-art, up-to-date piece of equipment, correct?
Through the chair to council, they'll all have the same cutters, and we're working through the plan. By the end of the second year, they won't all have the spreader units and the RAM units, but that's the goal that we're working towards. But they'll all have cutters. What we found is the new technology of the cars is moving faster than what we had on the trucks for cutting abilities. So we wanted to get everyone standardized with the cutters and then start with the rest of the tools as they...
My last question, Mr. Chair, thank you. The single source supplier, Hurst Hydraulic, we obviously have tools of theirs at this point.
Through the chair, that's correct.
And you're quite satisfied?
Yeah, and we've used them since amalgamation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand correctly that it's the training and that has to go along with this if you had different equipment, but I'm prepared to move the recommendation in the report, but I want to make a comment. There's too many reports coming forward that there's only a single source. We've had the EMS had the stretchers. We run into it on so many things all the time, and we need to look at our purchasing policy, plain and simple. The other one, and the next report's the same way, the single source, you know, but we come to these air bottles, and we've often said this, we're going to debenture air bottles for the fire department. That just doesn't make sense. You know, like, there's got to be a way of purchasing air bottles. Surely there's no single source for them, or did I read that? There is or there isn't. Anyways, I think we really need to take a look at the purchasing policy on how some of this stuff is done, and I'm prepared to move the recommendation in this report.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Black. Any further discussion? Just before we vote, I just had one question myself. I noticed that we passed the budget probably in February, and we're dealing with this in September, October. Is there some reason that this has taken so long to get here, if they were in need?
Through the chair, you are correct, budgeted for the year 2017. However, a lot of items are budgeted for 2017, so it's just the way the process comes through, so they're coming to you at this point in time.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Motion is carried. All right. That must bring us to the next staff report, which deals with standardization of bunker gear. I think we should have the report presented first. Councillor Brunton, please.
Through the chair to council, this report is for the standardization of bunker gear, and again, we're asking council to exempt staff from the quotation and tendering process to sole source or to single source and standardize to globe bunker gear and equipment for a 5-year term. Part of the background to that is staying with the same equipment. We have a large amount of globe equipment in the fire department right now. As people come and go, we can mix and match the coats with the pants of the same manufacturer. If we move on to a different supplier bunker gear, we can't do that, so it kind of nullifies the gear sets that we have. And we're doing this to further enhance safety and make it a little bit, you know, more operability anyways with the new recruits coming on. And yep, that's what I've got. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brunton.
Well, I'm prepared to move the report, but I guess how much is it going to cost us per year for bunker gear?
Through the chair to council, around $60,000 a year.
Per year? Oh, okay, there it is at the end. Okay. I'm prepared to move the report. Thank you.
Mayor Luke.
Well, I'm going to second that and just make the comment that a previous supplier to doesn't supply anymore, and it makes so much sense when a same suit that is compatible, jacket to pants, can be mixed and matched even between stations. I mean, this is a good example where you shouldn't be just going and buying a different, just makes sense.
We have a motion on the floor, moved by Councilor Brunton, seconded by Councilor Luke, or Mayor Luke. Sorry, I didn't want to demote you. Sorry about that. But your check will be the same. Councilor Oliver, would you like to speak?
I would, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do have a question on this one. I'm going to support the motion, but this is a longer term even than the 2017-2018, the 2-year commitment, so to speak, of the previous report. Do we have any kind of protection with this single source supplier of safe design apparel that the price won't start escalating in year 2, 3, 4, and 5 disproportionately? I mean, what kind of protection do you have given the fact that we're now committing to this one company for the next 5 years to buy this stuff?
Through the chair to council, we intend to work with the supplier to help, have them understand that we can't, work with, incremental increases unless they're approved by us before we go through. And now, through some research at the yearly shows that we go and see suppliers with different equipment, we can work through some of the pricing with that way to have a comparative.
Okay. So, in other words, Mr. Chair, staff will do our own research, and I gather you don't sort of preset the price for year 3, 4, and 5, but you'll make sure this supplier is aware of the fact that we're not going to just accept whatever they give us, in other words.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Columbus.
With that, can it be held somehow in future years, being single source seems like it's going to be happening? Is there any way that you can kind of equate it to the inflation rate, the increase? Can we push for that? Because if it goes up 10% and we want to keep everything standardized, it's going to cost the taxpayers that much more. So if you can kind of make a deal to keep it to inflation down the road, might be more palatable.
Through the chair to council, absolutely, we'll monitor it. We're not looking to get tied into that supplier. I mean, if we see that these increases, and we'll definitely ask for a set increase if there needs to be one over the next 5 years.
Councilor Sonnenberg is next.
In the report, it says all bunker gear is custom fit to each individual. So what happens to the bunker gear when someone retires and the bunker gear isn't worn out yet and the new recruit doesn't fit the suit? What becomes of this gear? Obviously, when a new guy comes in, he has to be fitted and a new suit is bought. But what happens to the old suit that isn't worn out?
Through the chair to council, so what'll happen is to get a new suit, when the supplier comes, they measure them. So that's part of the customization. Everyone gets measured, they get their suit. When that person leaves the service, their gear's left behind, someone else needs another suit, they can be measured the biggest part of the measuring part is the overlap between the coat and the pants. So as long as it's within the manufacturer's acceptable allowance, they can still use that gear without being customized per se.
Councilor Brunton, you're next.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, I understood this to mean we as council are giving them permission to use a single source. Doesn't mean if he's got a problem with pricing in that he can't come back and change that. He's not signing an agreement with that bunker gear company. Am I correct on that? You're just asking us for permission.
Ms. Darlington.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's correct, Councillor Brunton. This is a non-exclusive 5-year contract, so we are not committing to solely using this supplier. What will happen each year after council approves the budget allocated for bunker gear, we'll get price estimates from the supplier indicated in the report. And if those pricing is not appropriate pricing, then we're not tied into that vendor, and we'll be back to council saying that it's not appropriate and we're not willing to pay those funds. So we'll be monitoring it on an annual basis.
That's my understanding. Thank you.
Any further questions? I just have one. I think if I read this correctly, we are buying 25 sets of bunker gear, and the 25 sets include coats, pants, boots, helmets, hoods, and gloves. Am I correct on that? That's the unit.
Through the chair, that's part of bunker gear as a system is boots, helmets. What we're talking about is just the pants and the coat in the report.
That makes it even worse in the sense that if my math is right, I looked at 25 divided into $66,100. That's $2,600 per whatever. I appreciate the fact that you've been out to tender, but am I off base here? Is it that expensive?
That sounds accurate.
When I get young again, I'm going into this business. All in favor? It's approved. That brings us to the next, award of tender self-contained breathing apparatus. We're going to get a bargain on this one, I know. You're on, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. To council, so the last report that we have is for the award of tender for self-contained breathing apparatus. We're asking for the award of tender for the self-contained breathing apparatus as it's being an issuance of debenture from the Fire Vehicle and Equipment Reserve. So during the 2017 capital budget, we had $138,000 in the budget to replace some aging self-contained breathing apparatus. So through the process, we had 13 tender packages go out and 3 successful bidders. Dependable Emergency Vehicles was the lowest bidder through the process. Staff's also asking, due to the competitive pricing through the procurement process, that Fire and Rescue be able to purchase an additional SCBA unit as with an increased cost of $57,4866, which is still within the budgeted numbers for the 2017 capital. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I have one. What is self-contained breathing apparatus? What is that?
Through the chair, it's the unit that the firefighters wear. It's a frame with an air tank on the back with a hose that goes to a mask that seals to their face. So the only air they breathe is contained within that mask. So.
They're pretty expensive.
They are expensive, yes, sir.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Deputy Chief. It's mentioned in the report that this is in year 4 of the 4-year plan, and yet you're recommending 1 extra unit. So does that mean the 4-year plan starts again next year?
Through the chair. This was, yes, this is the last year of this 4-year stage. We'll be going back to reevaluate the rest of the equipment. This is the first year of the self-contained breathing apparatus units themselves. The other 3 years were part of the air bottle replacement program.
So, thank you for that. Now, Mr. Chair, or through you to the Deputy Chief, this is issued through debentures. So there's interest on that. So do you factor that in with your budget, because that part that you're getting that you think is a cheaper deal actually isn't, because there's interest on top of that?
Through the chair to Councillor Height. These were being debentured previously, but with the reserve report that went in July, one of the recommendations was to adjust our fire and equipment reserve to actually include items like this going forward. So going forward, we will actually be purchasing this equipment through the reserve rather than issuing debentures.
You have the floor, Councillor Height.
I'm just a bit shocked, Mr. Chair, because I see under the financial services comments that it says provided from debenture proceeds. But that doesn't jive with which our treasurer has just said. Only one can be true. Debt or cash?
You can tell them that.
Mr. Chair, may I?
I think the county manager has it explained.
Okay, because it goes on further to explain. Okay.
Go ahead. Either James or county manager, please.
Through the chair to Councillor Height, yes, you are correct. I was mistaken on the year of the purchase, so I was thinking about next year's purchases. They will be done through the reserve. However, for 2017, it will be a debt issue.
Now, have we issued that omnibus debenture for 2017? No.
Through the chair, no, we have not.
Any further questions? Oh, I think I had Councillor Black first. No? Okay. Councillor Brunton, maybe I had you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Am I doing the math right, that these are $6,000 apiece?
5,871.
Okay, well, and how long do they last? How long does one last? 4 years? Is that all? Does everybody that's a fireman in a certain station wear one of these? Like have it for his use, or are there only so many in a station? Can somebody answer that question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to council, everyone in the station is trained to use them. There isn't one for every person in the station, so.
How many per station roughly would there be?
Approximately 15.
And you need that many in each station, you feel? Would other stations that perform, let's say, get more calls, need these more often? Is that safe to say?
Through the chair to council, it's dependent on the calls that they run. They have more fires, yes. There's a number of reasons that they wear them, but call volume isn't always the indicator of how often they have to wear them.
So at that price, and you say each station has about 15?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And in every 4 years you replace them?
Through the chair to council, not every 4 years. They're on a, what the program's been is on a 10-year replacement. Now
Okay.
we're in the 4th year of this replacement schedule. But what we're trying to do is meet the changing NFPA requirements for the safety part, and that's where we're working through with these ones right now. Is the alert to the firefighter. It tells them when they're at low air. They've changed that standard from 25% of the air left in their tank to 33% for safety of the firefighter. So these new units are going to qualify, or are going to meet that 2013 standard.
Well, I don't dispute the need, that's for sure. I mean, I've seen these things in use, but I just sometimes get very frustrated with the way we get taken advantage of. I'll use that word, supplying equipment. It just seems, and we've seen it in the EMS helmets where they had to have a $450 helmet to wear on the EMS department. And you could buy a NFL football helmet for $150. So anyways, I support what you're doing here. I guess, what do you do with the old ones? Do they go up for auction, or does somebody, you pass them on to some other needy fire departments? How does that work?
Through the chair to Councilor Brunton, they'll go on the auction site for surplus equipment.
Well, maybe we should ship some out to the 10th concession of Charlottesville. I might use it out there. Thank you.
Mayor Luke.
I'm okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, motion has been moved and seconded, I believe. All in favor? Motion is carried. And I think that takes care of that. And the next report was to be rabbit and pheasant, but that has been withdrawn, so we're going to go to the next one. Yes?
What was the reason for withdrawal on that report? It says that it was supposed to correct current inaccuracies, and now there's a delay in fixing a problem?
I think we could ask that question, or you could.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think it was probably confusion done in my office. It was for the agenda, then it had been pulled for further review, and we thought that further review had happened, so we added it again. So it's just for staff to have a final polish of it before bringing it forward.
Councillor Columbus, please.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question about this report?
Don't see why not.
It talks about rabbits and ringneck pheasants, but what about the other wildlife that's hunted in our area, like grouse and doves and woodcocks? Like, does this,
Okay. It has been brought to my attention, and I apologize to you, Councillor Columbus, that we have already moved to defer this. So you may ask all those questions when it comes back to us.
hopefully he heard what I said.
Well, I'm sure he did. All right. That brings us back to the next item on the agenda is surplus properties and buildings. And I think that would be you, Ms. Darlington. Oh, it would not be.
That would be
That
me.
would be you. Okay.
Before you this evening is a report from our Facilities Division with respect to 3 particular surplus properties. These properties were left over from the conversion from Norfolk Power to Hydro One. They did not go to Hydro One as part of the sale, and staff are recommending that 2 buildings at 73 Victoria Street be demolished and that those funds be included in the 2018 budget. And we are also recommending that the property in Port Rowan be put up on the market for sale. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Black?
To move the recommendations contained within the report.
Thank you. And seconder, is that you, Mayor Luke?
That
We
would be
have
me.
now a motion on the floor, moved
Do I
and
have a
seconded, and you may now
comment?
speak.
I note that the 2 buildings on Victoria Street, Pond Street I always call it, but along that area of Victoria, there's no budget demolition, but that'll be determined in 2018. Maybe we'll have the Port Rowan property sold and there's lots of money for demolition.
That's forward thinking, Mayor Luke. Councillor Height, would you like to give us some forward thinking?
I would, Mr. Chair. I'd like to talk in detail about the 1120 Bay Street in Port Rowan. It looks like we have some environmental contamination on this property, and our option from staff is to sell it to the unsuspecting buyer and have them clean up our mess. Is that correct?
Through the chairman to council, absolutely not. The contamination, it's disclosed in a report. That report would be provided to that. The requirement to clean up, and I don't like to use the word clean up, depending on what somebody's potential future uses are, what they can actually do with respect to that. The estimates that we received were to remediate it back to certain standards that don't necessarily have to be, those standards aren't required depending on the future use of the property. We've had multiple inquiries from people interested in purchasing it, well aware of that information, and that report will be attached to the listing so that they're actually well aware of it when people go and look at the building. The idea is not to hide that, it's to fully disclose it. But there are people in the community who have indicated that they wish to purchase it, knowing the condition of the property, and especially because the uses that they intend to do don't require the exact same amount of remediation as we would do in order to sell it as completely vacant land.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we're okay selling the contaminated property to an owner if they have a use that can leave it contaminated? That doesn't sit well with me, just the same.
Okay, I believe that the confusion is coming from the word of the use contaminated. There is, I'm going to say there's lots of properties that for former uses, there is stuff in there. It doesn't make it contaminated in the sense that it's hazardous to your health, but there are certain things that you cannot do on properties depending on what is actually in the soil. And this all goes through, and I think Mr. Baird can confirm that the province has mandated through all of their planning things that they want properties being reused and repurposed and all of that sort of stuff. And part of it goes with this, and that there's lots of uses for those properties that don't require that. But in order for us to sell it as vacant land, we would have to remediate it. But we're not proposing to sell it at that. We're proposing to sell it with the conditions as it is. And what we understand is that from some of the uses that are being proposed, that the land doesn't need to be remediated to do that, and it's not material that is leaching off-site. It's located in the soil that's there, and it's not moving anywhere, and it's not going to move anywhere. So there's no potential for it to go off-site as a source of contamination. Some developers, when they do that, they'll be excavating through the material, removing it from the property anyway. Some people have indicated that they have no desire, that their use for the building will be in its current condition. So our thinking is that we should be putting it on the market because somebody else can repurpose that building for a purpose and not disturb any of the material in the ground and have no ill effects on the community or anything adjacent to it.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Chair, through you to Public Works again. So an owner could technically buy that property and move that ground off of there without you knowing and dump it somewhere else?
Through the chairman to council, absolutely. The difference is that the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change requires that if you're receiving fill that you have to provide documentations where it came from, what it's required by, et cetera. So while there's no requirement to notify the ministry, they do have to tell the people where the material is going, and they have to sign the appropriate paperwork in order for that to take place.
Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Lee. Lee, I'm on attachment to the Victoria Pond Street property. And a couple questions on that. Building number 3 on there used to be a streetlight switching area. Is that no longer in service?
Through the chairman to council, staff are recommending that building number 3 remain in place. Community Services is currently using that building, and it's in adequate condition for the purposes for which they're using it for, and we see no reason to take it out of service at this time.
Okay, and building 2, is it?
Building 2 and building 1 need to come down yesterday.
And is there not like a small substation on that property out from building number 2, or is that gone too? I can't recall.
It's all gone.
It is, eh?
Yeah, building 1 and building 1, you'll recall, is the one with a significant amount of water in the basement of the building. And building 2 is not structurally adequate for any use other than demolition.
So the substation's gone?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor by Councillor Black, seconded by Mayor Luke. No further discussion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to the next one, tender results, Norview Lodge building repairs. Who be that?
That'd be me.
Boy, you've got all kinds of goodies. You go right ahead.
Before you this evening is the award of the tender for the Norview Lodge repairs. As you can see through the report has come in, or the tender has come in over budget. Rather than come forward with a request for a budget amendment, we went through the tender and we identified the high priority and the medium priority items. We are able to award the project for the high priority, medium priority, and stay under the council approved budget to date. And the low priority items are mostly aesthetic type of items that can be addressed in capital budgets over the next several years and will be subject to future years' budget deliberations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yoo-hoo. I'm calling yoo-hoo. Councillor Black.
The recommendation in the report.
I need a seconder. Councillor Oliver. We have a mover and a seconder. The motion is now on the floor. Any discussion? Councillor Height, I believe it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the recommendation, it talks at this last, and further that staff be authorized to implement any of the lower priority items that can be completed within the allotted project budget. Now, the second contractor came almost $200,000 cheaper than the first one. Why wouldn't you just give them that and have that work done? If you combine the two, if you look at the low priority items, the bottom contractor came in much cheaper on that, where our other contractor came in much cheaper on the high and medium priority items.
Yes? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
This recommendation says that Reed and DeLay get all the work.
What this recommendation is saying is that we're awarding the work to Reed and DeLay for the high and the medium priority items. And then the second part of the recommendation indicates that staff be authorized to implement any of the lower priority items that can be completed within the allocated project budget. It does not necessarily mean that we're recommending that Reed and DeLay undertake those works, but we believe that once Reed and DeLay has completed their work, there'll be some funds left over in the current budget, and we're recommending things like maybe the painting could be contracted out just to a local painting company that would be able to come in and do that work after the fact for the full budget amount. That's what we're recommending. We're not recommending that Reed and DeLay necessarily do that work. Yes, but plus there's some engineering costs and some other costs that are included in that budget. Not with the money that's already been spent in the budget, plus all of the other costs that we've incurred dealing with all of this. That's the full project budget amount, so we're still significantly below that. And I don't believe that our tender is written that allows us to award parts of the contract to one contractor and parts of the contract to another contractor. We'd have to put that back out on the market that way.
Mayor Luke.
So Councillor Heidt has raised a good point here. I want to be clear. Through to Lee, we had a 1.536 million budget. Reed and DeLay came in at 818,000 roughly, leaving us a budget of about 718,000 left over. Now, are you saying that there is already of that 718 some spent on the low priorities at this point?
Through the chairman to council, you'll recall with respect to this project that we had to have some consulting firms, et cetera, come in to do all sorts of inspections and all that. So that's all coming out of that budget. So the 1.5 million is not the full amount that's available to spend to award the contract. That's the full project cost.
Got it.
Any further questions? Councillor Heidt.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
But
don't be
again, you'll
sorry.
see under additional optional pricing, that is for the vinyl siding. Yet if we jump back to the second paragraph below the price grid, it should be noted that low priority items pertain to either the building cladding or aesthetics, painting, staining, trimming. This is the whole wood thing. We had the discussion of wood, vinyl, siding in a budget meeting previous to this. So this is fix the wood and then what? Come back later down the road and vinyl siding? Without any, why would we do it twice?
Through the chairman to council, we are not. I'm very surprised to see this building has like every type of possible siding you can possibly imagine on it, everywhere. It has vinyl siding, it has wood siding, it has all kinds of other kinds of siding and all kinds of things. So it's very hard for staff to articulate this. The low priority items that we picked out are mostly aesthetic related. We are doing repairs to vinyl siding, we are doing repairs to wood siding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the optional pricing items were to remove things like all of the wood siding and replace it all with vinyl. The costs are in staff's opinion, prohibitive. The costs that we're going to be looking at to do that work, when we've already got to do a substantial number of repairs, it doesn't make any sense to do that. So it's a combination of things. There's all different kinds of siding. We have no intention of fixing wood siding and then replacing it later on with the vinyl siding. There'll be areas where we're actually removing wood siding and placing vinyl siding as part of the medium priority items.
Okay, thank you for that, but I still find that we're not going to resolve the entire problem. I don't want, this is the building that never ends. It keeps coming back and coming back, and now there's additional optional pricing, there's low priority. This sounds to me like 3 years' worth of Councillor Height sitting here having to put his hand up for these Norview envelope repairs.
Through the chairman to council. Should council wish, staff are more than happy to implement all of them. We put forward this recommendation in order to try to stay under the budgeted amount. We need approximately $350,000 additional dollars to the approved capital budget to implement everything that was included in that contract, not including optional pricing items. That's a decision for council to make. We chose to bring forward the report not as a budget amendment to allow council to spread that additional $350,000 out over the next 3 years. Should you wish to do it all right now, we can certainly award the contract that way.
And what option number is that in the staff report?
Through the chairman to council, that's not in it because that's not under staff's mandate to randomly pick those types of things. We were asked to deliver the project under budget. Staff have brought forward the recommendation for how to do so under budget. Should council wish to do something else, we're more than happy to implement that.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to move that motion because...
Thank you.
Because finance hasn't had a chance to comment and stuff on it, but I would have liked to see this dealt in one deal as opposed to the pain and suffering over the next 3 years.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor by Councillor Black and Councillor Oliver. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. That brings us now to staff report, Delegated Purchasing Authority. Would that now be you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an information report before you tonight to advise Council of the delegated purchasing activity that occurred for the period of January 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2017. These are for purchases between the amounts of $50,000 and $250,000, and they have to meet certain criteria. Attachment A in your report outlines all of the activity that has taken place, and staff are recommending that the report be received as information.
Councillor Columbus, please.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the recommendation. I do have a question, though, on page 80.
Could you wait until I see if I can get a seconder? Okay. All right, now you may ask your question.
Page 84, the purchase of 2 new ambulances. This price, does it include the new hydraulic lift mechanisms that we approved back a couple months ago?
Sorry, through the chair, no, I believe the stretchers are not included in that price because these were budgeted for the 2017 budget.
So will these units have the new hydraulic lifts in them after, like put in place when they do arrive?
That is correct. Through the chair, the power stretchers will be installed in the vehicles in the next, I think it's 1.5 years before they're all in.
Okay, thank you.
And if, Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, here we go again, and I don't know why, but sole source for the ambulances, 2 of them. Is there nobody that in the province of Ontario or in Canada that can supply an ambulance other than this company? Why a sole source?
Through the chair, I'll take a stab at it, and I'm sure Mr. Cridlin can follow up. This is a vendor of record with the province for the ambulance provision, so we'll review that on a regular basis. We have a meeting coming up with EMS and the general manager to review that vendor of record to make sure that it's still appropriate for the county's use. But my understanding is that the reason it's indicated as sole source is it is already a provincial contract that we piggyback on.
Okay, but you know, it's too much of a monopoly on some of these things, in my opinion. There's, you know, well, we just went through it with a lot of fire stuff, but there's got to be a better way. My other question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on some of these jobs here, like I noticed the Viola water repair and maintenance, for example, on page 82, $150,000, approved budget $2.4 million. big difference, but when they bid those, like, did he have to bid that job? Somebody answer that? Do they have to, do they?
Ms. Robinson is going to answer.
Through the chairman to council, Veolia was the successful contractor with respect to our wastewater operations. As part of that, they are the ones who undertake that work. That's part of their contract that they do that. They then go through their own purchasing process, which is very similar to ours, having to obtain 3 bids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So while we're issuing it to Veolia, Veolia has in fact gone through a competitive process to obtain those prices for us.
So, did we have that item budgeted at 2.4, or is that their total contract? What is that?
Through the chairman to council, that's the total price that we pay to Veolia for the operations of all of those sorts of things. So it's already a budgeted item, and that is within their approved budget that they're working through.
Okay, again, I see a lot of single source. There's a couple other ones in here, if I may. When you ask, there's one in here for Mr. Valley, for Dover reconstruction projects, $223,000, and it's substantially under the approved budget. And my concern on those, when we're dealing with capital budget, I don't know, I've seen things high and I've seen things low when it comes to tendering, but $223,000 on a $350,000 budget is quite a bit of difference, and it's good for us, I guess. My concern is that when we're dealing with capital budget and we're looking at something that says $350,000, we may be eliminating something because we can't afford it. If you get 3 projects that are estimated really high and they come in really low, we end up at budget time trying to cut things out so we can't, where in reality we could possibly do more work. And I guess I've raised a concern before, but I think we have to have a little better handle on some of these things in terms of estimates. I don't know if this was just something different in the contract or what, but do you follow me on that, Lee?
Through the chairman to council, I think I understand to some extent. That was done through a competitive process.
Right.
And when this was originally budgeted, so back in 2016 for the 2017 year, each project was budgeted individually.
Right.
I recommended to staff that we group the projects together and issue them as a single contract for certain areas every year for the engineering services. I felt that we could see some cost savings. This was the first time that Norfolk County, in its recent history, has grouped the engineering projects in this manner. And so we're actually finally seeing the cost savings that I believed that we could see by the way we were tendering. However, this is the first time we've ever done that. And so the original budgets were set assuming each one was going to be tendered independently and individually for each other. The additional thing that I think you need to remember too is that some of these projects this is the engineering cost for the project. So what you're not seeing yet is the engineering for the implementation. So when they're in the field and they're doing that part, some of that will come out of the engineering budget yet. So while you see it as being below the total engineered amount, it's not necessarily, although this portion is less than what we budgeted, it's not necessarily less than how much we're going to spend on the project. It's how much this contract is for. There's lots of additional engineering that'll still have to be done that hasn't necessarily been awarded yet.
Well, I realize that, and I'm not being critical of the pricing of it here. I'm just saying when we estimate things, it's nice to have, well, you say it's new, so maybe as we go down the line here, we'll have better budget figures to work with, is what I'm saying, I guess.
Absolutely, through the chairman to council, absolutely. That's the intention, that these are some of the new ways that we're starting to implement things. We're looking for cost savings. We're trying to find ways to save some money for the municipality, and these are some of the things that we're implementing to do that, and we're starting to see some of the benefits of those cost savings and of rolling things out, doing the engineering the year in advance. We're now getting detailed cost estimates so that when we're putting the capital budgets in for the following year, we actually have more information to be able to base those numbers more accurately. And that'll help eliminate the high surprises and the low surprises.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. Just another curious question here. When you do, on construction, are the bid deposits, they're like, they have a bid deposit, usually 10% on your construction tenders?
Through the chairman to council, on a construction tender, yes, it would typically be in the neighborhood of 10%.
And they have to put in a bid bond at the same time?
No.
No,
They have to prove that they're able to be bonded for the full amount, but don't actually have to put, it depends on how they choose to do that. You can put in a bid bond if you want, or you can put in a certified check for the $10,000, for the 10%. It just depends on how the contractor wishes to do that. But those are released upon the stuff for the performance bonds. That is they have to provide proof that they're able to be bonded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. We have a mover by Councillor Columbus, second by Councillor Height. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to the next staff report, Norfolk Celebration of Culture. Who be doing that? That would be you, Ms. Darlington. You are on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. New application has been received from Very Marketing and Development for an outdoor special event to hold a multi-location festival to pay tribute to the culture and heritage of Norfolk County. Events will be taking place throughout the county, including Simcoe, Port Dover, Delhi, Waterford, and Port Rowan. There will be various activities taking place, including live entertainment, some light athletics, vendors, refreshment areas, and tours. The purpose of this report is to seek approval from council for 2 temporary closures associated with this event. The first is with a municipally owned parking lot on Culver Street between Argyle Street and Sydenham Street in downtown Simcoe. This portion of the event will feature theater performances, visual art, music, and a licensed bar area. The second closure is a temporary road closure in Waterford for Alice Street between St. James Street South and Audie Street. This location will host a harvest dinner to celebrate local flavors prepared by local chefs, followed by a street dance. Both closures will take place on Saturday, September 23rd from 10 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. in the evening. Planning is well underway to support a successful event, and staff are recommending approval of both of these closures.
I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? So we can, all right, moved by Councillor Black, second by Councillor Sonnenberg. Questions, comments? Councillor Black.
Just, I know some people might ask the question about parking, but parking on Saturday in downtown Simcoe in the last few years isn't a problem anymore.
That's sad. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. That now brings us to temporary road closures. Oh no, I guess it'd be application for encroachment agreement. Staff report, found on page 93. Who be that? That'd be you.
Yes, sir.
You're on.
All right, this report relates to 326 Main Street in Port Dover. The subject property is occupied by a clothing store and residential usage. It's attached to 328 Main Street, which is the Dover Apothecary, to give you an idea of where it's situated. This report is before you to renew an expired encroachment agreement, and staff have no concerns with recommending its approval. With that, I would answer any questions you may have.
And Councillor Black has already asked, he's got another engagement, so that's why he left. Okay, sorry. Councillor Height, you were going to move that?
Okay, and I do have a question.
Oh yeah, let me get it
move
on the floor first. I was to remove Councillor Height, second by by Mayor Luke. Now you may ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the clerk, it says here that the applicant pays all costs associated with the encroachment agreement or application. So how much are those costs, Mr. Clerk?
Oh, good question. I believe the encroachment application fee is $360, so that's what got this report here initially. And then there's a fee for the registration on title. which is done to corporate support services. I believe it's over $100, but under $175. I'm not sure the exact amount, but it's in that vicinity. And they're also responsible for any surveyors. We already have a plan of this property, so we don't need a surveyor or anything like that, or any lawyers that they would need to in order to process it.
Now, are these fees in our user fee schedule?
Yes, sir, they are. And council, last year, we did a pretty significant increase to the encroachment application fee because it obviously takes a lot of time to do this consultation. So I believe it went up $150 just in the last year, which brings us more in line with what other area municipalities were charging because we were a bit under.
But it's not full cost recovery? Because clerks aren't cheap.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We did do it a basis of, we use financial services system where we estimated the staff time involved for these, and so it is fairly accurate. You can't ever say that it would be full cost recovery on every report because some are a lot more involved than others, but in this one it's pretty straightforward, so it'd be safe to say we recovered our cost.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we have a motion by Councillor Height, seconded by Mayor Luke. All in favor? That motion is carried. Bringing us to the temporary road closure. Who be that? Ms. Darlington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is another special event application received by Culture Rodeo. They are planning to host a street festival in downtown core of Simcoe. The event is to pay tribute and celebrate the importance of offshore workers who come to work in our community and contribute to the financial success of our local businesses. The event is taking place on Friday, September 15th. It will require the closure of some roads in the downtown core. For the benefit of the public watching tonight, Sydenham Street between Norfolk Street South and Culver Street Simcoe, Colburn Street South between Lott Street and Court Street. The intersection, however, will remain open. Peel Street between Colburn Street South and Kent Street Street between Peel Street and Robinson Street. The hours of closure will be 9 a.m. till midnight on Friday, September 15th. There will also be some sidewalk installations and sales occurring as well. The application has been circulated to all of the appropriate departments and agencies, and staff are recommending approval of this closure.
Thank you very much. Mover, seconder. Moved by Councillor Sonnenberg, seconded by Councillor Columbus. Discussion. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, last year when this, I think, first inaugural event happened, I was away, but I had heard about it ahead of time, and I thought, boy, this is actually a really good idea to have something annually, or more than one thing, to recognize our offshore workers. So I'm glad staff are recommending approval of these closures. I bid the organizers the best success, because we know we're unique in Norfolk County with the number of offshore workers that come every year, thousands of them, to help us produce and harvest our crops. So it's pretty important. They are very valuable to the economy, and I think we should all try and come out and experience some of this new culture. Thank you.
Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Bringing us to the next item, which is the terms of reference for the Recreation Facility Input Subcommittee. Would that be you, maybe Mr. Cridlin? Nope. Would that be you, Mr. Gazelle? You're on.
I certainly may rely on Mr. Cridlin to help with some of the questions that you might have. Yeah, this report is really to satisfy the requirements of policy EBS 39, which requires all committees to have a staff report in terms of reference prior to beginning their work. There's been a number of kind of issues that have come up related to this report. So what we're kind of looking at is to get some direction from committee on what exactly committee desires. Some of them that, just to highlight some of them, there's been a desire stated in the terms of reference currently we have the meeting time for 5 p.m. So there's been a desire to have that changed. There's also a desire for staff to facilitate an open house type session after the conclusion of the subcommittee meeting. and to track input received from this type of session. And there's also been a request to expand the meetings to include a sixth location, potentially in Langton, and at least one follow-up meeting after the conclusion of the road shows. Another issue raised is the timelines for meetings. There's a desire to begin on September 18th. There are a couple issues of that we could potentially get around if committee desires. The first being that there's a limited amount of time for staff to prepare, so essentially any presentation or guidance documents, they would have until this time next week really to get those ready. And one other aspect is that in terms of the public notice policy, usually we try to require 2 weeks notice prior to any public engagement sessions. But if the subcommittee did meet on the 18th, right now the earliest we could advertise is on the September 14th and 15th, and it would also be advertising without any materials available. So normally if we did start looking to advertise for this, we kind of have a package or something to link people to in the ad to the website, but we don't currently now. And that ad would be, if we published that ad and got it in for the deadline tomorrow, it would run on the 14th or 15th, so we'd be not waiting for council approval in order to get that in to facilitate the 18th. But all these things can be done by direction from committee, and really as staff we're just looking for direction from committee to hash these things out and provide us how you want it done. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions and hope that Bill can also help me as well.
Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think the three of us that are on the committee, assumed we could just go ahead and get our work going and have a great old time and do a lot of good consultation. And as usual, and we thank him for doing this, the clerk reminded us we do have to go through certain procedures for this to all be legal and follow protocol. So I, for one, have no issue with the terms of reference, other than the thing, and the clerk did mention that, it was, I think, our feeling that more people will likely be able to and choose to come out to these consultation sessions if they weren't completely over the dinner hours. In other words, starting at 5 o'clock and finishing at 7, you would have fewer people attend, I think, than if we open the doors at 6:30 and started at 7 o'clock and go on to 9 o'clock. So that's the one change. And I'm asking the clerk now, do we need to have that as an amendment to the motion when we deal with that, or because I think that is one thing that we did want to have changed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think, I mean, obviously you can run the meeting however you want, but if there's some overall direction to approve to make amendments and then to approve the terms of reference as amended, I can make all the changes to the terms of reference.
So you're making that suggestion that
yes,
that it start at 7.
Well, doors open
door
at 6:30
and start the meeting at 7.
Start the meeting at 7, correct.
That, please?
And Mr. Chairman, the other thing I would like to comment on that Andy touched on is the timing. We are willing and able, if you'll allow us, to announce the dates this evening when these 6 consultations would happen, in particular with the media here. It's my hope, I think all of ours, that they would cover that and make some note of those meeting dates. But Andy did mention the first one, if it happens on the 18th, is going to be very tight, and we acknowledge that, but I think it is important to get the process started ASAP, and for that reason, I think we would like to stick with that date as the first one.
So September the 18th?
September the 18th would be in Waterford. September the 25th would be in Port Dover. Then, unfortunately, we've got to skip a total of actually 3 weeks, one of which is the Monday before Fair Week, and we know we've decided to move our council meeting, to the Monday night. The following Monday is Thanksgiving Monday, so that obviously would not be appropriate. And the following Monday is one when I at least was going to have to be away, and I didn't hear Councillor Geisens and Black say whether we would want to proceed with just the 2 of us or not. So in the absence of that, the third meeting, would be October the 23rd in Port Rowan, October the 30th in either Langton or Cortland, and I don't know whether Councillor Geisens has decided yet which of those would. Okay. October the
October
30th is also a Monday, of course, and to be determined, but either in Langton or in Cortland.
Well, why don't we just go Langton?
Langton, okay, good. November the 6th would be in Delhi, and the final meeting would be on Monday, November the 13th in Simcoe. September the 18th. And part of the reason, Mr. Chairman, why we're mentioning these tonight, you saw in the terms of reference that every member of council is encouraged to attend these meetings, but especially the member from that particular ward area